Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CX Connect, brought to you by CRM, Smart Customer Service, and our Diamond Keynote sponsor, Alvaria. I'm Bob Fernikes, and I'm the publisher for CRM Magazine, and I'll be the moderator for today's webcast. I'm sure many of you have attended one of our webcasts over the past 25 years, but this week we've added something a little different to the webcast this morning. At the end of the formal presentation and Q&A, we will have Jeff Abels, chair of our in-person conference, Smart Customer Service, and managing partner at C5 Insight, join us for an informal backstage chat with today's speakers, David Funk of Alvaria. But first, we will view this brief video, and then we'll come back and I'll introduce our speaker in today's presentation.
And customer demand is peaking. That's when every interaction counts. And this is where Alvaria enters the equation, delivering higher intelligence and efficiency for optimized customer experience and workforce engagement. Great customer experience starts here. The future of CX takes shape with the Alvaria best-of-breed contact center applications. These new solutions are designed to empower enterprise organizations to make the most of every customer and employee interaction and deliver world-class experiences that drive lifetime loyalty. Enterprise scale, deployment choice, compliant outbound, control, and privacy. We are Alvaria.
Welcome back. Well, now I'm going to introduce our Diamond Keynote speaker this morning, Alvaria. The name of the presentation is the De-Centered Contact Center, Building Customer Loyalty in the Next Normal. But before we begin, I just wanted to explain how you can be part of this broadcast and participate. If you have any questions during the presentation for David, please put them in the Q&A tab rather than the chat tab. We'll get to them in the last few minutes. And as I mentioned before the video, we will also have, come back for a backstage chat with David and our speaker, Jeff Abels. So I hope everyone sticks around for that. So now I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. We've got David Funk, Senior Vice President, Chief Technology Officer at Alvaria. Welcome to the broadcast, David.
Hey, thanks very much. It's great to be here. So thanks very much for your time, everyone. I wanted to start out today, as I thought about what we were going to be doing. I thought I'd start out with something a little bit different. Now, I have technology in my job title, and I think about software every day, but I also have a creative side. So I thought I would start out by reading a short excerpt from a poem by the great Irish poet W.B. Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So, what do we think of that? Sounds a little bit like what 2020 felt like to me. Things fall apart. Now, I don't want to subject you all to a detailed view of our pandemic woes, nor do I want to make light of the reality of those pandemic difficulties. In fact, I'm sure there are people out there in my virtual audience who lost people that they care about in these last 2 years. But I think it's important for us to reflect a bit on this recent time. We need to acknowledge how significant this period really was. The pandemic was, without a doubt, the most monumental event of my lifetime. And as infection numbers drop and mask mandates are lifted around the globe, I think we will all benefit from a clear-eyed assessment of these past 2 years. Because without an understanding of where we've been, we can't know where we're headed. Our outlook now is certainly much different than it was back in March of 2019. Now, just so you don't think this is going to be the most depressing keynote you've ever heard, I wanted to remind you all that we have indeed survived these past couple of years and things are looking up. And I'll do that with a little help from some of our friends at New Yorker magazine. So when we were working from home, it brought us some new perspectives on productivity, like this guy. Casual Friday took on a whole new meaning. And we had to get used to living with ourselves. All right, so I will give you a moment to read this one. Okay, so that one is a little dark, but really, we see a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're fairly certain it's not a freight train. So, what can we make of this moment in time? As we think about the last 2 years, several things come to mind. Perhaps the first word that most of us think of is unprecedented. Clearly the most overused word of the pandemic era. But it gets used so much because it reflects our reality. We have never been here before. And where we were before, we will never be again. These past 2 years have changed the course of the life of just about every person on the planet. It is truly a paradigm shift. It's an inflection point. The roller coaster ride that was 2020 and 2021 has moved us all into a new era, an era that I think is best captured by the term, the next normal. If we all want to be successful in our jobs and careers, I believe it is essential that we step back and try to understand this paradigm shift. Particularly in the business world, the way things worked before no longer apply. And if we continue to use these same methods and approaches that worked in the previous era, we will fail in the next normal. So today, I want to spend some time with you examining how this new era will impact the contact center specifically, and how we can apply strategies and technology to help us navigate this next normal, so we can continue to deliver great contact center experiences and succeed in that essential task of building lifetime loyalty in our customers. So, what defines this next normal? What characteristics of this brave new world do we need to acknowledge and respond to in order to build this next normal contact center? Well, let's look at some of the trends that are shaping the next normal. First of all, the pace of change is only increasing. One of the things we learned from the rapid onset of this pandemic is that we need to be adaptable. And we have the power to change even when we think we can't. But more on that later. The pace of change is relentless. And one result of that rapid change, I think it's safe to say that the only certainty is uncertainty. As an example, between the time I started to prepare this talk for you today and now, we are all faced with a full-scale land war in Europe. Certainly something I never would have imagined back in 2019. So another thing that's true of the next normal is that the pace of innovation also continues to increase. Now, another way that the world has changed is that work from home is here to stay. And it's not just work from home, it's work from anywhere. Now, offices are opening up again, but they'll never be the same. I think we can all agree that commercial real estate is a difficult and challenging business to be in right now. The pandemic has taught us that most of us can be just as, if not more, productive from the place that is most convenient, and that is almost never the office. Now, I hear from company after company that they are reducing the number of seats they have in offices, that they're moving to a hotel seating paradigm. They're changing the focus of the office to be a place that we come to meet colleagues when that's important, rather than a place we come to punch in every day and punch out when we're done. The world has changed. So the pandemic era has also changed forever the way we look at our work. Why do I say that? Well, let's think about the second most overused phrase of the pandemic era, the Great Resignation. The New York Times came up with a clever turn of phrase that I think is a lot more fun than the Great Resignation. The quitagion. Look at that stat, right? An estimated 25 million people left their jobs in the second half of 2021. That's the highest quit rate since we began tracking the quit rate. Now, this trend poses massive challenges to organizations of all shapes and all sizes. But is it really as simple as 1 in 10 people in every workplace suddenly deciding that they're going to wake up one day and quit? Absolutely not. If we think about this, it's only natural to realize that this is a phenomena that feeds on itself. I mean, if you sign into work and you realize that 3 or 4 of your 10 teammates have moved on, you start to think to yourself, what am I missing here? Is this something that I should be looking into? This trend feeds on itself. But that's not the root of the issue. At its base, this is being driven by something much more widespread and much more fundamental. According to Gallup, 15% of the world's workers report that they are engaged at work. 15%. In the US, the statistic isn't much better at 30%. Think about that for a second. 70% of American workers report that they're not engaged in the workplace. Now, I think a better term for this phenomena is the Great Reassessment. The challenges of the pandemic, the way it threw all of our lives upside down, have led us all to take a good hard look at why we are here and what we want out of the years that we have on this planet. So does that mean that we're going to all hang up our spurs and lie on a beach for the rest of our lives? No, not at all. People need meaningful work. People want meaningful work. What the pandemic era has done to the workforce is that it has led us to a realization that most people want jobs that fit their lives. And those people are willing to sacrifice job advancement or higher pay to preserve these other and less tangible goals. And the other thing that people are learning is that in this job market, employees have the power. In most cases, they don't need to sacrifice pay or advancement. They just need the drive to move to a different position. So, does this mean as a leader or a manager that you're destined to have half of your team disappear on you forever? Not if you play your cards right. Remember that the reassessment is not about not working. It's about finding the right work. That means there are going to be winners and losers in this game. This is a massive paradigm shift, and at times of major change, these are great moments to flip challenges on their head. So take this opportunity to be one of those companies that are on the winning end of the Great Reassessment. And how will we do that? Well, by paying attention to what our contact center staff really want, and by making their workplace as engaging as it can be. So remember that the Great Reassessment is happening not just because people want work to fit the circumstances of their lives, but they also want something deeper. Many of them are looking for a deeper sense of engagement, increased connection, or a sense of belonging. Now, all of this reminds me of a concept that I think any of us involved in leading contact center employees should be aware of. And that is the Japanese concept of ikigai. According to Wikipedia, ikigai is a Japanese concept that refers to something that gives a person a sense of purpose, a reason for living. Ikigai is often represented with this type of Venn diagram. It considers 4 basic drivers that determine how humans choose to spend their lives. These drivers are the 4 circles represented here: what you're good at, what the world needs, what you love, and what you can be paid for. Now, the important thing about the concept is understanding where these categories overlap. If you're spending your time doing what you're good at and what you can be paid for, that's represented by the section labeled profession. If you spend your time doing what you're good at and what you love, that's captured by the section labeled passion. What you love and what the world needs, that is mission. And the overlap of what you can be paid for and what the world needs can be called vocation. And you don't have to necessarily be in one place in the diagram. What you do as a hobby or time you spend volunteering might fit the diagram in different places than the time you spent on your job. So I think it's helpful to look at some examples of famous people and place them on the graph, right? How about Mother Teresa? Well, I think it's safe to say that Mother Teresa spent her life doing things that the world needed. And she certainly seemed good at it. It seemed to be something that she loved, but she wasn't doing something that was highly paid. So I think we would place her at this spot in the diagram. Now, someone like Meryl Streep or LeBron James, they're definitely good at what they do. They seem to love it, and they're certainly paid very well. But it's hard to say that the world really needs basketball or film acting. So they belong in this area of the diagram. You get the idea. Now, let's consider Elon Musk. Now, this might be controversial for some, but I personally believe that climate change exists. And I think the world definitely does need more electric cars to reduce the carbon that we're spewing into the atmosphere. So Elon is doing something that the world needs. And it would be hard to argue that he's not good at his job. And it sure looks like he's having a good time. Clearly, he's one of the richest people on the planet. So I think we can all agree that he belongs somewhere in this Ikigai center. Now, I think this is a great way of codifying how we can make decisions about the direction of our lives. Anytime you're getting a little more toward the middle spaces of this diagram, you're doing pretty well. And if you're getting into these sections labeled, passion, mission, and vocation, you're probably a pretty happy and satisfied person, and you may be getting paid for it too. Now listen, not all of us can be LeBron James or Meryl Streep or Elon Musk, but figuring out where your passions, your abilities, and what the world needs and how they intersect is certainly a valuable exercise. So, how does this relate to the contact center? What is this next normal for the contact center specifically? Well, remember our poem that captured how 2020 felt? Remember the chaos that we all felt in those first few days when everybody went home? We weren't sure our corporate networks could handle the strain. We had business processes that only worked in the office. And all of a sudden, our livelihood depended on the internet connection of each of the employees of our company across the globe. A video conference meeting was only as strong as the weakest internet connection of the group. It was deeply unsettling. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. But the world didn't fall apart. We adapted. Sure, there were some disruptions, but massive institutions across the globe adapted far faster than we ever thought possible, than they ever thought possible. Now, a big part of that adaptation has been around this shift to work from home. And that shift has forever changed the contact center. Many contact centers just don't have a center anymore. The contact center is now decentralized. So let's take a look at a specific example of this rapid decentering of the contact center. It's also a great example of how a large institution can adapt more quickly than they ever thought possible when the pandemic changed the world. In 2020, one of Alvaria's largest customers, a top 20 global bank, came to us with a very specific problem. Many of their contact center agents were based in India, and when that country locked down, their agents didn't have sufficient connectivity to work from home. Now, at the same time, the physical branches across Europe were closed as well. So there they were, thousands of agents offline and unable to take calls in India, and in Europe, thousands of branch employees with nowhere to go and nothing to do. Now, because we and other vendors had the flexibility of a cloud-based solution, Alvaria, along with these other vendors, we were able to shift their operations to a new decentered contact center environment with the branch office employees working as agents. Alvaria was able to onboard several thousand agents with workforce management and contact management capability in just a few weeks, a handful. A process which pre-pandemic would have taken many months and on premises would have taken more than a year. And because this new consolidated workforce management approach gave the bank consistent capabilities and processes across both contact center and branch employees, they continue to use the solution for both populations even after branches reopened. Now, this institution was able to respond more quickly than they ever thought they could. And the boundaries of their new decentered contact center expanded to new users and new capabilities. Now, this work from home world poses very real challenges to managers and business leaders across the globe. I mean, how can we build a sense of teamwork when everyone is scattered all over the place? Will innovation suffer when we can't brainstorm in front of a whiteboard? How do we make sure our people are really working when they're sitting in their kid's bedroom? I bet many of you remember this unfortunate father who went viral sometime back. You know, first one kid came in, then the other, and then his wife burst in and grabbed them both. Now, if it's any consolation, if one of your contact center agents gets interrupted by an unruly kid, at least they're not being broadcast on live television. Now, of course, all of these changes vary widely by the type of business and by the maturity of the workforce in question. But I think we can all agree that the decentered contact center poses some unique challenges. The first challenge is that the general population of the contact center agent pool. As a rule, these agents, they tend to be younger and at earlier stages in their careers. Many don't have college diplomas, and turnover in this group is quite high compared to other business populations. Retaining and motivating this group can be an uphill battle. And monitoring behavior and rewarding positive outcomes is particularly important for these less seasoned team members. And the Great Reassessment is a factor for this demographic group, perhaps more than for any other. Now, the distributed contact center also puts a strain on our business processes. Maintaining efficiency and consistency in work outcomes can be more challenging in this distributed world. Maintaining top-notch security standards is also tougher in this environment. The pace and volume of technical change in the next normal also puts a tremendous strain on the technology of the contact center. Maintaining technical consistency in an environment that has exploded outside of the traditional bounds of the corporate network demands focused planning and deliberate care. These challenges are very real and very significant, but they're not insurmountable. Let's take another look at a real-world example of a very rapid decentering of a contact center and how some of the technical challenges posed by the change were solved. So back in February and March of 2020, Aspect Software, one of the companies that joined together to form Alvaria, worked with our customer, Hoist Finance, to move their 800 plus agents to a work from home environment. We were able to help them do this in just 11 days. That's quite remarkable. We were surprised ourselves. And it wouldn't have been possible without the agility and flexibility that the public cloud provides. Now, one nice outcome from this was that Hoist and Aspect were honored for this collaboration at the 2021 European Contact Center and Customer Service Awards. So thank you for that. But the reason I wanted to talk about this particular customer example was that their group head of IT operations, Connor Shaw, shared an interesting anecdote with us about how they solved a technical and process challenge. So as their management team was working to move their agents to work from home, they were very concerned about maintaining their PCI compliance. Their supervisors wouldn't be able to physically monitor the credit card information that their agents used, that gathered when they had been, the way they had when they had been working from the office. You know, how would they maintain security in this new work from home world? The management team set out to find a technical solve to this security challenge. And they ended up implementing a solution to collect credit card information using an IVR process without any agent involvement. It was a real mother is the necessity of invention moment. Necessity is the mother of invention moment. With a little bit of resourcefulness and innovation and ingenuity, they were able to establish a process that was both more secure and more efficient than the original, even in this new work from home environment. So those are interesting challenges, right? But what about your customers? What about the people that are reaching out to your company? How will customers in the next normal approach this new decentered contact center? Will shifting expectations drive new challenges for contact center managers? Well, let's start by reviewing how the next normal is influencing the behavior of our customers. Then we can predict how these factors will drive demands on the next normal contact center. So this next normal world that your customers live in is one where change is happening faster and faster. Uncertainty is the only thing we can count on. And if change is accelerating, then innovation is accelerating even faster. Where will this rapid change and innovation leave the contact center? Well, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg would tell us all that we need to be building our next generation contact center in the metaverse. I mean, if you think human beings are hard to keep engaged and hire, imagine the challenges of scheduling avatars. This takes gamification to a whole new level. But that's a whole other presentation. Maybe that'll be next year's keynote. I'm certainly not ready for that yet. Yeah, so back to customer demands in the real world. In addition to persistent uncertainty and this furious pace of change, the work from anywhere phenomena also impacts your customers and the times and methods that they will use to interact with your center. So how do we summarize how all of these drivers will manifest? Well, I think the best way to capture it is that the customer of the next normal contact center will increasingly demand frictionless experiences. So what do we mean by a frictionless experience? Well, customers will demand the channel of their choice based on where they are and what they want to achieve. Second, technical innovation will continue to produce new communication channels that will make their way into the contact center. For example, increasing use of video conferencing in the workplace will drive demand for video in the contact center. And yes, we will eventually get to demand from the metaverse. Now, I also think that third, self-service, it will move from a cost containment strategy to become table stakes. But this will only be for simple tasks. And fourth, when your customers know that they won't get a complex question answered by self-service, access to a real human will need to be there, and it'll need to be there fast. So these are the shifting demands for frictionless experiences. But what happens when these rising demands for frictionless experiences combine with the challenges posed by this decentering of the contact center? Irresistible force meets immovable object. Look out. don't despair. Remember that technical progress is accelerating innovation. There are many things we can do to help us meet these challenges of this brave new world. So let's take a look at 3 main takeaways that can help the contact center leader avoid this irresistible force colliding with the immovable object. First, remember, your entire strategy needs to be built around data. The public cloud has made storage of massive amounts of data affordable, and this opens up fantastic new possibilities to us. Second, wherever your agents are sitting, it's foundational that they be engaged. And third, channel choice is essential, and denying your customers access to an agent when they know they need one, it just simply won't fly. So, data. Sherlock Holmes got it right. Get the data first and then make your moves based on that. So early in my career managing development of contact center software, I had a boss who used to tell me, in the contact center, if you can't report on it, then it didn't happen. Absolutely right. And as work in general, and the contact center specifically, becomes more and more decentralized, this ability to capture data and reflect it back in a meaningful way, it becomes critically important. Now, if we're going to remove friction from the CX experience, then the only way we can do it is by analyzing the tracks left by the encounter. Those tracks reside in data. Now, whether that data is an audio recording or statistics about time in queue or a disposition record from the last time your customer reached out, we need to have the ability to sift through and elevate the meaningful nuggets of this data, highlighting the changes that will make a difference, that will move the needle. And all of this is made possible by distributed computing in the cloud. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, they're fueled by massive amounts of data, volumes that we never thought possible, and these things are driving tremendous innovation. Now, machine learning has just matured very significantly in recent years, and it's now squarely in the world of practical realities. If you want an example that will drive this home, take a look at this article from the New York Times Magazine about how machine learning has forever changed the game of poker. Now, it tells the story of how computer scientists at the University of Alberta used machine learning and game theory to essentially solve the game of poker. They set up fleets of computers to play each other in poker, play against each other over and over, billions and billions of times, and track which strategies won and which strategies lost, and to reuse the ones that were winners. In 2015, they published their results in the journal Science under the title, Heads Up Limit Poker is Solved. Heads Up Limit Hold'em Poker is solved. Well, it's not too surprising, but professional poker players took interest. Now, these guys hired computer programmers, some from that academic team, to take these academic algorithms and turn them into money machines. Today, you can select from a handful of these poker solving applications that are available on the web that leverage game theory to produce solves. I found one touting itself as a professional grade that for a cool $1,099 will give you that critical edge in your high stakes game. And it supports running on a little machine that supports up to 64 parallel processors. That is one big server. Now, these solutions, these applications, they won't result in winning every hand of poker, but a player who uses these tools will crush even the best player who is just playing at the table using her own wits. Now, I don't know about you, but I will think twice about playing poker for money online, knowing that these tools are out there. Now, to try and wrap our minds around how this works, we need to understand a little bit about game theory. Game theory uses the diagram of a branching tree to represent paths that a game can follow. A simple game, like rock, paper, scissors, is represented by 3 branches, one for each combination that your opponent can play. One for rock, one for paper, one for scissors, for a total of 9. According to this New York Times article, in even a simplified version of Texas Hold'em poker with just 2 players, the combination of branches is a number with 15 zeros behind it. That is 306 quadrillion. I had to look it up. And in a full-blown game, the experts said that we are approaching the number of atoms in the universe. And machine learning handles it. The pace of change continues to accelerate. These are advances that are unlocked by data. Now, it's important to remember that in the contact center environment, data is key on both sides of the conversation, both your caller and your agent, people contacting you and the people who are handling those contacts. With a work from home agent, data is the best pathway to provide us a meaningful picture of that person's effectiveness and their level of engagement. Now, this leads us right into our next major takeaway, that engaged and happy agents lead to loyal customers. And how do we know that engaged agents are so important? Well, every year, Alvaria produces what we call the Alvaria Annual Consumer Index Report. Now, this is a study that compiles feedback and opinions from over 1,000 customers across a very wide demographic. The report is full of interesting results that shed light on trends that cut across the contact center industry. If you're interested in digging in and learning more, it's readily available. It's just search on the Alvaria website. And the survey results point to the importance of agent engagement in the overall customer experience. Survey responses year over year reinforce the positive impact that the positive impact of happy agents continues to increase, continues to trend up. And according to a recent Harvard Business Review survey from June of 2021, 80% of respondents agreed that a great customer experience is dependent on a great employee experience. So it's pretty clear this is something we should be paying attention to. So let's dive into strategies on how to move our contact center team members towards this better level of engagement, toward that Ikigai center that we talked about before. Now, earlier on, we spoke about how the great reassessment is driving people to seek an increased sense of connection and a sense of more meaningful work. We should remember that not all problems have a technical solve. Sometimes good old-fashioned leadership makes a difference too. Now, we need to remind ourselves and our employees of the importance of what we all do. The pandemic taught us that the contact center can be a critical resource for people. I mean, my company during that time, we provided solutions that helped make sure that people had access to their groceries, that they could travel to meet their loved ones. My company helped ensure that New Zealand's telehealth response could scale to meet the demands of COVID-19. I learned about these things in the pandemic because we told ourselves those stories. And I felt more engaged during that time with the value of the mission of my company than I have in any other time in my career with Alvaria. And it's not just my company. I am sure that each of you has stories like this. If you just step back and reflect a bit, and it's important that we tell ourselves those stories. Contact centers provide critical links for people around the world. And we need to remind ourselves in the day-to-day that what we do, it's important. But beyond leadership, what technology tools do we have that are available to us to help us foster happy and engaged agents? This focus is especially important today when our agents are in the throes of this great reassessment and working from the isolation of home. So how do we leverage that data foundation with software that can make a difference for the agent demographic? Well, a great place to start is to take your data about agent and contact center performance and turn it into fun. To do this, we can use gamification platforms that leverage game theory. Game theory applied to your agent population, it can use proven psychological principles to maximize the engagement of your agents. Now, it does this by leveraging psychology to trigger 4 distinct neurotransmitters. Dopamine, it's released when rewards are received. Serotonin, it's triggered by a sense of achievement and acknowledgement of success. Endorphins are triggered by competitions and contests. Oxytocin is released when peers collaborate and work toward a common goal, creating a sense of belonging. These neurotransmitters work together and they drive really spectacular results. And that leads to a fantastic sense of job satisfaction in your agents, which leads to further improvement. It's like a virtuous circle. Now, we can also use modern data tools to optimize our employee experience. If we can monitor the data conditions in the contact center in real time, things like calls in queue, average handle time, and feed that into an artificial intelligence engine, we can use it to optimize utilization of their time and connect them with things they might need. The AI engine provides a launch point to reach out to people in a targeted and context-specific manner. It allows you to reach out to the specific person who needs it in the moment that they need it. Examples of this include providing training or sending back office work in off-peak windows, or delivering a reward or a perk like an extended lunch hour to some agent who's done a great job and really deserves it. Making these connections based on real-world conditions is particularly important in this decentered world where agents are working from anywhere. Another opportunity we have to improve agent engagement and effectiveness is to take the most boring parts of their jobs and take them off their hands. The idea here is to take mindless and repetitive tasks and automate them. We can hand them over to a computer, which is perfectly suited to do repetitious work based on data. Computers love to do repetitive work. Now, there are companies that specialize in this process. It's called RPA, Robotic Process Automation. But also because it's particularly useful in the contact center, a lot of contact center providers like Alvaria have RPA solutions that are specifically tailored for that environment. And the benefits go beyond just keeping your agents happy. This automation, it reduces errors and it eliminates friction for your customers by speeding up their transactions. It can give your agents more time for the important things that they can do, that only they can do, keeping customers happy. And it reduces cost by maximizing the most expensive commodity in the contact center, your people. All right. Now we have covered how we can use automation to remove friction from the employee experience and to optimize their experience, and how we can use gamification to motivate them. What do we need to do to make the customer experience frictionless in the next normal? Let's start by reviewing a few more key findings from our customer index survey. A key finding in this report is that frictionless experiences for customers need to be both quick and they need to be effective. Most of all, they need to be effective. Respondents said that correct resolution stands out above speed, convenience, and even personalization. Above all, customers told us that they elevated this get it done right category that includes effectiveness, accuracy, and security. Those are the key fundamentals of the customer service. These were followed closely by a make it painless group consisting of speed, ease of use, and convenience. And lastly, the on my terms category, covering the human touch and friendliness and creativity in their contact center experience. This increased in importance year over year, but it still lags behind those key fundamentals. So another finding, customers are embracing new ways to engage. Consumer adoption of these alternate channels and new technology and self-service it's on the rise with significant growth in chat and SMS, up 18 and 14% respectively. In 2018, less than half of consumers had interacted with the contact center in any other way than with a live agent. In 2021, almost every non-agent category has jumped to over 50% exposure, with some surpassing 60%. Forms of contact, such as automated voice and messaging bots, they're reaching levels of market penetration that we have never seen before. The last notable result from the Consumer Index report: we can also reduce friction preemptively. Consumers want you to keep them informed, but only when it matters to them. They appreciate having content delivered to them, but only when it's relevant. That means they want to hear from you before they incur a late fee, for example, or when their flight has changed. And I find this last statistic particularly interesting. A surprising number even welcome marketing info if it's a product that they care about. So, what are the things that we need to do to respond to these rising expectations? Well, we've already established that our customers are working from anywhere. So we need to give them corresponding flexibility in choosing how they come into the contact center to get their needs met. We need to give them choice based on where they are and what they're doing. And if they want a quick piece of information, they will demand that information be available by self-service. But if they know their question is complicated, they'll be very irritated if they can't get to an agent quickly. We need to deliver that kind of flexibility. Second, we have to solve the problem right, and we have to do it the first time. Nothing adds more friction than being bounced around because the first person you talked to couldn't help or just plain got it wrong. Third, we need to keep it seamless. If your customer's challenge demands that they switch channels, then all their previous information needs to move with them. I mean, if we can create a bot that will automatically answer my questions, then why, when the bot can't find the answer, can't it pass my question to an agent? The next normal demands better. And finally, frictionless should mean removing friction before it happens. Your customers want you to reach out to them when the information really matters. Be proactive. So if we keep these things in mind, provide flexibility to make it effective, to keep it seamless and be proactive, we can deliver on those frictionless experiences in the next normal. So, the world has changed. The demands from our customer are always increasing. The challenges around delivering positive contact center experiences, they continue to mount. But if we keep these three broad principles in mind, we can navigate the challenges of this world we're in, the next normal. First, data is the foundation. It's the fuel for good decisions. It powers automation. And it is the basis for the tools that we can use to engage our agents and satisfy our customers. Second, no contact center can be successful without engaged and productive agents. And facilitating that engagement is particularly critical in this new work from anywhere world. And finally, we must strive for that frictionless experience to meet our customers' demands for channel choice, for self-service when it's convenient, but always an agent when necessary. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this valuable, and it was truly an honor for me to speak with you today. Thank you.
That was so fantastic, David.
Thank you.
Probably the first time I've ever heard anybody start something with a poem from Yeats. Fantastic.
It was a bit of a risk, but you know, I thought it was a great fit, right?
You know, it's you know, the way you walk through the story, people will look back on these days and just say, what happened there? And how did they deal with it? And we're in the process of dealing with it right now. And all of the things we were talking about with the decentered contact center and agents working from home and this whole new paradigm shift, people, you know, culture is changing, society is changing, the way people are interacting are changing. All your slides, well done. We have some questions from our audience. So I'm going to ask everybody, if you've got a question for David, he's a Renaissance man and he can go either way. If you want English literature questions, that's great. He can handle those too. No, we won't make you do that. So here's a good question. What's the most vital part of customer retention through your technology?
I had a bit of trouble hearing you. The vital part of what?
Of customer retention through your technology.
Of customer retention. Well, you know, I think we covered some of those things. I think driving that lifetime loyalty is what we're always striving for. And, you know, I go back to the agent experience. I mean, I've told stories about my own experiences, and I know what makes a difference for me is even, I guess the point I want to make is that even if you mess it up, right? Even if we are, even if we make it really tough for somebody to get out of the IVR if they know that they need to speak to a human. If you get to a human and that human really treats you well, and that human really takes care of you and hangs with you, even in a difficult challenge, I think that makes the most difference. I had an experience where I was getting a card rejected and I needed to call my bank, and I was out, we were buying a Christmas tree with my family, and I had screwed it up. It was my mistake, right? And I couldn't get out of the IVR. I was really frustrated. They were calling me and texting me. But when I got to the agent, the guy was fantastic. He was very helpful. He went out of his way. And even though that experience wasn't great and they could have done much better, the fact that that person had a personal engagement with me, that really made a difference. I think that's super important.
Great, fantastic. Here's a question. What's the next step in your roadmap for your technologies? Because you definitely seem like you've got a strong sense of where things are going to go out of this chaos that we've been in or still in.
Well, you know, I talked about the data foundation, and we at Alvaria are building that, particularly with our public cloud software as a service offering. We have our Alvaria data platform, which is really a data lake architecture. If you now I'll get a little techie here, right? A data lake architecture is basically taking advantage of the cheap storage the public cloud offers and storing structured or semi-structured data in a very inexpensive fashion that then you can superimpose meaning on top of that with SQL schemas that can change. Anyway, we are building that. That's in production now with some of our first customers, and we're continuing to extend that, unlocking the data of the contact center as a foundation. And then on top of that, that's when you have that unlocked, when you have that data lake foundation, you can build all of those really interesting, groundbreaking, and really revolutionary capabilities. So we have that data lake architecture is in production today. We're continuing to extend it, and we're bringing new capabilities to our public cloud that are available in some of our private cloud offerings right now. Things like real-time speech analytics, things like additional robotic process automation capabilities. So all of those things are this year in our roadmap, and they're in development now. Very excited about them.
Fantastic. Here's a question from Donna. And you had mentioned game theory. So the question is about game theory. And her question is game theory's take on employee experience something built into your products? Do you take that in? Is there a gamification portion built in? And if you could just explain it to people who may not be familiar with that term.
So we have a product that is available both in our, it's available in our private cloud and in our public cloud offering as part of our Alvaria cloud called Motivate. And it's a gamification platform. And it does more than that, but it seeks to engage your agents by taking the data that on their individual performances, and it allows you to set up contests between agents or set goals for them, reward them with an icon that they can decorate their avatar with, or office card, right? Something that an Amazon card they can spend money with. So that's available in our public cloud and our private cloud, and it does leverage game theory.
All right, fantastic. We're running up against the hour, and we've got a backstage chat with you and the chair of Smart Customer Service, Jeff Abels, coming up. 15 minutes. Stick around, everyone. You don't have to go anywhere. But I'm going to pass things over to Jeff. Jeff, can you join us?
Hi, Bob. Hi, David.
Hey, Jeff. All right, so I'm going to pass things over, and everyone stick around. This is going to be very interesting. So, Jeff, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, and thanks for having me, David. Amazing, really good. I've got my notes app up here, and I have like 6 screens of notes with lots of screen grabs of quotes and statistics and everything else you had in your presentation. So really excellent. Just kind of backstage, just conversationally, there's a few things I was jotting down in my notes that either me or I thought the audience might want to know more about. You mentioned, you got into automation, and you mentioned automating routine tasks. That struck a chord with me because I was literally just doing interviews with a client, and one of their service reps said, essentially, we got this new app to do work for me, but I feel like I spend more time working for it, right? It was almost like the future is now, right? We've got these computer programs, and it's making people feel like they work for the computer instead of the computer working for them. And you mentioned RPA. And what went through my mind, and I think maybe others, is what's the difference between automating with RPA and automating in a classical way, right? Like, do you still hire a developer to do that? How does RPA work? What value should people expect to get out of a process like that?
Well, what RPA tools provide is they provide ways to knit together disparate applications. These solutions have really been around for a long time. But the way that they've matured lately is that they elevate the experience of configuring and developing these processes to a way that a developer doesn't need to. You don't need a software developer to do it. It can be handled by a business expert. There needs to be some technical acumen, right? But many times you can do it with just kind of a workflow user interface that connects boxes and does a change in processes. So that's really important. And a key difference too is that you have two broad categories. You have attended RPA and unattended RPA. And with attended RPA, that's things that are helping facilitate repetitive tasks for a specific human, like your agent, right? Where the agent might have to do some work and then press a button that will automatically take their work and copy it into 5 different places and bring up the next thing that they have to do. It's more about a human's workflow that they have to move through. And then there's unattended RPA, which is more of a back office process that will perhaps move a workflow document, like insurance processing is a classic example, right? It will take a claim and it'll move it from one station to another and wait until it has been processed at that particular station, right? So that's an example of unattended RPA. And a lot of times you can get these two things to work together. But it's different than just any kind of classic automation in that you have to analyze your business need, and you have to find the things that are common, that are repetitive, and really, this is why I keep coming back to data, right? You need to mine your data about what your people are doing to be able to determine that they're all doing the same thing that's taking a big chunk of time, that you can then, that friction you can remove with the automation piece. So it's not about writing a brand new piece of software from scratch. It's about taking specialized software that knits other pieces of software or processes together. I hope that helps.
Okay. I think it does. Let me say it back, and you actually triggered another thought I want to ask about, but it sounds like what you said is RPA kind of starts with having data, having good analytics, so you can see what is my team doing regularly and at least fairly consistently that I could maybe automate. But then instead of having to escalate that to IT, you might even be able to find a technically astute member of your call center team, a power user or whatever you want to call it, who might be able to do this. It's not coding anymore. It's more, sounds like it's almost like, I remember, I'm old school, right? So I remember making macros. It sounds like it's almost like macros where I say, watch the screen and enter these keystrokes and do this. And then it can go down two paths from there. One is, I think you called it attended, where right before my eyes, I do something and the computer kind of does the next steps for me, and then I pick up where it left off. And then unattended, where it's watching behind the scenes and it kicks off some unseen process for me automatically that enriches things down the road for me. Is that doing justice to what you described?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And the analogy to macros is a good one if you're old school, like me. It's a lot of the capability. It can be done with scripting, and sometimes a power user will want to use scripting because they're wonky and fast. But you can also piece it together with a workflow user interface that more of a business user can do.
Okay, excellent. So you also mentioned constantly collecting data, and you mentioned that throughout your presentation as well, which of course is critical these days. What I sometimes hear too, though, is, hey, you're accumulating all this data, but I feel more like Big Brother is watching me than that. This is just for the value of the organization. So how do you deal with that concern?
Well, I think we need to talk to our people, and we need to get our people to trust us, right? I mean, where the rubber meets the road with that is people will see what you do with your data, right? I mean, if we are on board, and this is not a technical answer,
Sure.
if we're all on board with the mission of what we're doing, and we all want to get better, then data is just a tool to facilitate that, right? And I guess I also think that for contact center agent populations, I do think that they're particularly well suited to these gamification platforms, right? Because it is a population that for whom bling in your avatar makes a difference, right? It's not something that really, maybe I'm just ancient, right? But it's not something that really moves the needle for me. But if people see that the data that we're collecting about the jobs that they're all doing are ways that we can reward them, or we can set up things that will be fun for them to play off against each other, they'll learn to trust that process. And it also goes back to mission too. Is what we're doing important?
I think I like that answer. I also liked how you started and framed up your whole session, because you didn't go straight to technology. It eventually came around to that because that's part of it. But you started very, very foundationally around philosophy, and kind of, instead of the what we do, it's almost who we are. And I saw someone ask this too, and I know this isn't necessarily what this talk was all about, but everyone talks about we have values and we want employees to be happy and all of that. But that's in written statements, and oftentimes it goes unfulfilled or missed. So any words of wisdom to share about that? If someone on this call is in a position of influence, but perhaps not ultimate leadership, how do they help to create a little bit of that in their organization? Any thoughts on that?
Couple things. I think the tone is set by executive leadership. I mean, I really do. And I've seen in my career, I've seen executive leaders who have inspired me, and I've seen executive leaders who I just thought that they weren't out for, and that didn't inspire me. Let's just put it that way. And so I think that's pretty foundational. And I talked about the stories that we tell ourselves about how what we do is important. An example of that executive leadership setting the tone was the stories that I shared that our company had done were told to our entire employee population by our CEO. And it was inspiring. So I think that's important. I also really think that making sure that a first level manager is keeping in touch, keeping those positive relationships with their people, I think that's critically important too. Again, not a technical answer. But
no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, what you guys are putting in the market, I think supports that so well, but it supports the real meaning for why we work, right? It's a tool that helps do that. Great answer. Thank you. I have one other one that I think I kind of saw between the lines of what some others said. You had talked about, and forgive me if I don't get this quite right, but you talked about when you're talking about analytics and the 316 quadrillion Texas Hold'em options and those kinds of things. You had talked about there's self-service and then there's a human connection, and self-service is kind of for simpler scenarios, and then humans are still needed to get involved in those more complex scenarios. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but I think yep. I got the basis of that right.
Yep.
Can you, with bots and AI and intelligent agents and all of those things, I feel like the line of what is complex and requires a human is moving a little bit. Can you share anything, whether it's a specific scenario or a case study or just some guidelines around what can I expect in today's world or maybe the near future world is simple enough for self-service, and where is that line where a human needs to get engaged?
Well, I mean, I think we've all, I will approach almost any initial customer contact on the web. I just start with chat, right? And I think that bots are really progressing very quickly. There's a lot of investment in the market with them. I evaluate these solutions all the time, right? And we have our own solution for this. And that it's something that is growing and changing, but we are not at the place where when we're on the other end of a bot that we don't know it. I guess truth be told, it's impossible for me to know that that's true or not, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, and at least with 95% of the solutions that we encounter in that space. So I think we need to be realistic about what those pathways are. And, things like getting the hours of service, checking on the status of we can do more sophisticated things like checking on the status of an order that is in process, right? Mm-hmm. Those things could be automated by bots, but they have to be things that you anticipated, right? So I'll go back to my experience with me I was trying to get cash to buy a Christmas tree, right? I talked about this contact center experience where the agent was great, but I had trouble getting out of the IVR. I knew that I couldn't ask the bot, why the heck won't my card work?
Right.
I knew that I wasn't going to get that answer. So now I really do believe that machine learning is accelerating, it may be that 5 years from now, that 10 years from now, I can ask that kind of question. But I don't think that's available today. But things like scheduling an appointment, things like things where you can anticipate all of the parameters of the encounter, those are very well suited for that automation.
So it sounds like bots probably aren't yet smart enough to just say, look, there's all my data on all my databases. Someone asks you a question, go find it. It's more, we have to kind of create that wiring on our own. It's more sophisticated than an old voice response unit, but it's still not sophisticated as a human sitting at a keyboard who has all the intellectual capital around all the internal systems and who to ask for what.
Right. Now they do continue to get more and more sophisticated, and they get, the more data that you feed them, the more they can kind of define the space, but they have to be able to define the space of the encounter. And I like to think of it as a cluster plot, right? If you have the entire universe of the things that your contact center encounters, and you have a bunch of things that are relatively that kind of cluster here in the middle that are the most common things, that's where you gotta look. You gotta look for the things that are achievable, and focus on those, and then grow out.
David, I've got one other question. I'm looking at the list, and something came in that made me think of a scenario that I'm running into, and I suspect maybe some of the folks who are listening still have run into this or experiencing this in their own organizations. So we work with a lot of clients, and a couple of them pop out who managed to get through the entire last couple of years without having work from home options for their call center. Everyone still comes in, they work in a centralized or a couple of different centralized places, and they're using ancient legacy applications, which is part of the reason why they couldn't give them any remote working options. And it's literally green screen AS400 backend. I mean, like pretty old school stuff that they're using. And now they're kind of saying, well, we managed to get through that, but now is coming the great resignation. People are giving people these options. What's your advice to them? Is it sort of a, well, if it's not that bad, don't worry, because in 6 weeks you can migrate to a work from home scenario, or you need to start now because it takes months or years to make that transition?
Well, I think it's never too late, and it's never too early to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And I think the right thing listen, your green screen application, it's not going to age any better than it's aging right now. So it's not like a fine wine, right? But listen, I think they're going to have to take that step. They're going to have to take that step. Now, I'm also a technologist who tries to be pragmatic about the business realities. So I would encourage them to look at RPA solutions. One of the things that RPA solutions do is they scrape those screens. They can interact with the literal terminal to push data to those terminals and pull data from them, and essentially hide the fact that it is that there's a mainframe in the background. So that's one of the places where RPA has value. So that's not the solution that you want to build your business on for the next 25 years, but that's a solution that you can use to help to ease your migration away from that expensive legacy, difficult to get out off of mainframe, to a more modern deployment architecture that's centered on the cloud. So you can look at RPA as a stepping stone that will isolate you from your mainframe application and get you to a place where you're using more modern tools and take advantage of the public cloud. That's what I would advise them to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights with us. Just outstanding. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It was my pleasure. It was great to meet you guys. And thanks to everybody who's out there listening. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. Just one little bit of housekeeping for Edward Casado from Brooklyn. You are the winner of a $50 gift card. so, so we took it all full circle. Thanks so much, David. Supremely uplifting, great production values. Just well done. Well done. Thank you so much. And you too, Jeff, by the way. All right.
Thanks to all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.